All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. I'm going live tonight to discuss all the latest news centered around the Epstein Files and what's been trending centered around that. A lot of new stuff come to light, as always, and I've been very clear on this channel from the start that I'm not covering this topic every day or multiple times a week even, because there's just a lot of dust that needs to settle, a lot of information circulating around, a lot of AI slop and misinformation plaguing everything. And even within the Epstein files themselves, it's important to understand that there are certain things that have been entered and admitted into those files that aren't reliable. Third-party accounts, anonymous tips. At one point, there was an anonymous tip hotline that you could call or write into and send information to, and it would automatically be included into the Epstein files. So I've been waiting for the dust to settle overall, but when more concrete stuff happens and occurs, that's when I feel comfortable reporting on that. So some of the latest news, what I'll be discussing in today's episode centered around the Epstein files and the newest information we have. Howard Lutnik. There's been more news centered around Howard Lutnik and the Epstein files right now. Also, the Trump 2006 story. More information coming to light about how Trump was handling this in the mid-2000s and what his response to all of this was. In my opinion, sort of once again validates and vindicates what I've been saying when it comes to Trump's involvement with Epstein all along. I'll cover that as well. Then I want to get into well, it's a twofold issue, but the disgraceful handlings of these Epstein files by the Trump DOJ centered around, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Todd Blanche. I've been paying attention to Assistant Attorney General Todd Blanche. Very, very off-putting. Gino, Trump himself. On top of that, the fact that Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna had to once again unite to create a letter to write a letter to send to the DOJ to remind them, hey, you can't be unredacting a lot of these names that you're trying to redact. The Epstein Files Transparency Act prohibits that. These are not, in fact, victims' names you're redacting. You're protecting people. And now we've seen the result of that. The DJ had to capitulate, thankfully, in this case. Normally, I'm mad when this administration capitulates to demands, but in this case, it's a good thing because in this case, this DOJ is actively trying to cover this up. And I'm going to cover why and how that's happening as well. But in this case, they unredacted some names. So now we have the names that were unredacted. I, of course, already went live and I discussed who Les Wexner is, but now his name's been unredacted from these files, which again validates and vindicates everything I've been saying in regards to that as well. But there's also Lesley Groff and, what's his name? Some French guy, Jean-Luc Brunel. Gonna cover him too because he's another interesting one. So that's all that's in store for this episode of American Advocates. As always, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like the stream because it helps the stream perform well in the algorithm when you do, or the video after the fact if you're not watching this live. And if you haven't already, subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. Before we get started, I see I got a chatter here. Squidman, hey, welcome back, Squidman. Squidman 7389 says I can't look at beef jerky the same again, man. Yeah, I've been seeing the beef jerky stuff. I'm not gonna touch on that one too much. That's one of those ones that I have some questions about. I don't want to, for the sake of accuracy and credibility, whatever credibility I can muster up sitting in my car, wearing a hoodie, drinking out of a water bottle, reading off of a notepad here of various things I've scribbled down. I don't want to cover the beef jerky stuff in the Epstein files just yet, but as more information comes out, we'll certainly get there. So, this Howard Lutnik news, that's the first thing I want to talk about here. Howard Lutnik. I kind of like the guy, to be honest with you. He seems like a likable guy, so this is very disappointing. Now, Howard Lutnik's official story, we've known that his name very likely was going to be in the Epstein files. I got wind of that last May, in fact, when I was doing research on this. He was Epstein's neighbor in New York City, if I remember correctly. So there was a high chance that his name was going to be involved. But I, of course, was just hoping. I was like, well, this is the Secretary of Commerce here. He seems like a pretty optimistic, bright guy. I hope he's not incriminated in these files. And I'll just say it. It's not looking good for Howard Lutnik. It's not looking terrible. This seems to be a nothing burger when it comes to some names. Howard Lutnik seems to be more on the nothing burger end of the spectrum here, but his story's not adding up now, and I'm not a fan of that. So he says, Squidman says, we may not agree on everything, but I still like your content. God, thank you. I appreciate that, man, Squidman. Thank you so much. So Howard Lutnik, his original story when it comes to, yes, I see the like coming. Please be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Howard Lutnik's original story centered around Jeffrey Epstein was that in 2005, apparently, he had known Epstein for a while, whatever. And in 2005, he apparently discovered that Epstein had a massage table in a bedroom. And he said Epstein emerged with a very mischievous, borderline creepy looking grin on his face and decided to confess to Howard Lutnik in '05 that he liked massages from very young girls. According to Howard Lutnik and his own statements on this matter, he said that that was the point where he realized he didn't want to have anything to do with Epstein. So he said he looked at Epstein and said, "You're done," and cut him off from his life. That's Howard Lutnick's official story regarding Jeffrey Epstein. However, now that story has been changed, altered, and proven to be inaccurate by Howard Lutnick himself, as his name has appeared in the Epstein Files and he's been investigated, or he's been questioned on it at the very least, now admitting that despite that 2005 interaction that he claims to have had with Jeffrey Epstein, and despite the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was convicted for the first time right around 2008, 2009, Howard Lutnik apparently was on a family vacation sailing on a boat, on one of his boats, near Little St. James Island. So he decided, I guess, in 2012, December 23rd of 2012 to be exact, that he would stop on Epstein Island to have lunch. Now, of course, Howard Lutnik says, first and foremost, his memory escapes him for why he decided to do this, why he wanted to do this, why this happened. And despite the fact that his memory escapes him on why he decided to do this, he does seem to remember the exact duration that this lasted. And he says, well, I had lunch with Jeffrey on Epstein Island for 1 hour exactly, no more, no less, and then I was gone and I never saw him again. I think that's verbatim, pretty much, not verbatim, but that's pretty close to exactly what Howard Lutnik testified. So that's where we're at with Howard Lutnik. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I don't like the inconsistency in the story. That to me, that to me warrants an investigation, to be honest with you. And, as a very conservative person, and as someone who this time last year loved Howard Lutnik, because his energy is infectious. He's an optimistic guy. I love where he's coming from when he talks about bringing back America. I can appreciate a guy like that. It seems like he really wants his name to be out there and known for being one of the lead contributing guys for restoring our economy. Now, of course, you fast forward over a year and it's like, will that ever even happen, or is our economy just fucked? But that's besides the point. And it's also besides the point that I liked him back then. To be honest with you, I don't like this at all. Not at all whatsoever. And this kind of inconsistency is very shady. It's the kind of inconsistency, in fact, where if you were watching this on one of those, criminal investigation channels where they're showing live police interrogations happening, you would be watching that and go, gotcha. And now the investigators are going to grill you and they're going to pull up a lot more and they're going to figure out stuff. They're going to start connecting dots. Just to be frank with everybody here, that could be tough for MAGA people to hear. As you know, I've stated this several times before. I am not MAGA. I would have possibly identified as such last election season, of course, especially when it came to voting between Trump and Kamala Harris. I think it was a no-brainer. I'm also very socially and fiscally conservative. But I am not MAGA. MAGA is very cult-like, and if you're not careful, you can get absorbed into that cult. It's very important to not allow yourself to get to that point where you're worshiping one man or putting all of your hopes into one person. We vote on lines for a reason. We held our beliefs and ideologies for sure. But MAGA is very cult-like, and so it could be very tough for a lot of people to hear this about Howard Lutnik, being that, he's the Secretary of Commerce in this administration. But there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Howard Lutnik at this point deserves to be investigated. He was Epstein's neighbor in New York City, and he now, of course, he's backtracked on his original statement. He was on the island in 2012, and that was 4 years after Epstein was originally convicted for child predatory behaviors in Florida back in the 2008-09 era. And it was 7 years after he insisted that he cut Epstein off originally from his life because of a 2005 creepy massage table incident. So that's where we're at with Howard Lutnik. That's the latest news on Howard Lutnik and all of this. I'm just going to leave it at that. I just wanted to get that out there because I found that fascinating. And this is the kind of stuff that it deserves it. It deserves an investigation. And I look at a lot of these other countries with these Epstein files being released, and I'm angry, in all honesty, that, these other countries seem to be taking this a lot more seriously than we are. So that's where I'm at with the Howard Lutnik story. Just wanted to share that out there. The next story that emerged when it comes to the Epstein files. Hi, Seven Gator. Hello, Yoli Garcia. Hello, Yamamura. Welcome to the stream, everybody. Be sure to like the stream, by the way, if you haven't already, just to give this a boost in the algorithm. Anyways, the next story that emerged that I found fascinating when it comes to the Epstein files, this Trump story that's emerging. Now, I'm going to start right off the bat by saying this is not the smoking gun against the liberal narrative that the Republicans want it to be for Trump. They want this to be the case closed, Trump's definitely not guilty story, and it just isn't. Now, on this channel, I've already made the prediction that Trump will not be implicated in the Epstein files. This is kind of a no-brainer to me, or anybody who really has researched this topic like I have over the last year. You're not going to get Trump implicated in these files. I don't believe Trump was involved in the activities that people want him to be involved in. That's facts. But this story does not also exonerate Trump from what happened in the Epstein files either. This story is kind of down the middle. I think it points more towards my prediction of Trump not being guilty of this Epstein files stuff. But it doesn't just completely exonerate him like I'm seeing a lot of these MAGA channels say that it does. And that story is, of course, in 2006, according to a report, a direct testimony from the former police chief of Palm Beach, Florida, Michael Reiter, R-E-I-T-E-R. There was news that broke of an investigation into Jeffrey Epstein in July of 2006. Now, Michael Reiter says, as the police chief of Palm Beach, Florida police, that when this news story broke, Trump actually called him, according to him. And Trump, according to this police chief, called him and said, hang on, I got the quote here. It's a quote of a quote. This is a quote of Michael Reiter quoting what Trump said to him from recollection, so not verbatim. But according to Michael Reiter, Trump called him and said something along the lines of, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone knows he's been doing this for a while. It's disgusting." Reiter said that Trump would later on in that phone call go on to call Jeffrey Epstein gross, and then would actually, according to him, go on to point out Ghislaine Maxwell, which authorities did not really know all that well at the time. And according to Michael Reiter, the police chief, he said that Ghislaine Maxwell was pointed out to him by Trump, and Trump said that she was the real evil one. So that's the report. And of course, the MAGA people are jumping all over this and saying, well, that settles it. I'm not here to say that, but I am here to say that that does, again, tip this into the scale, into the direction I think of Trump not going to wind up being implicated in these files in an incriminating way, just to be honest with you. A lot of people knew Trump. A lot of people are mentioned in these Epstein files hundreds or thousands of times. That is not a direct link to guilt, unfortunately. I wish it was that simple. I wish we could look at the files and just look at every name listed thousands of times and go, they must be guilty. But we can't. We just simply can't, because Epstein, and I'm going to cover this again a little bit later, as I already deep dived into this last week, Epstein was a networker. Epstein literally made it his business to get to know everybody who was wealthy and powerful. The more, the better. And so names are going to be mentioned, and people do like to point out the high number that Trump's name is mentioned, 5,000 times. But, you know, I'm not here to tell you one way or another that Trump is guilty. I'm certainly not a liberal, so I'm not jumping on that bandwagon whatsoever. I think it's a brain dead approach to do that. But as a conservative, I'm going to stand by my prediction. And my prediction, according to what I knew last year and what I'm learning even more so this year so far, at least, is that Trump's not guilty of the crimes that the liberals want him to be guilty of when it comes to these Epstein files. I am willing to stand corrected on that, however, because the one thing we need to bear in mind with this is this lousy, corrupt, scandalous Trump Department of Justice is trying to cover this up, and they have not released all of the Epstein files yet. We've only gotten half of them. And so who knows what's in the other half, right? And so I am willing to stand corrected. I don't have, as somebody who's not MAGA, I do not have my ego invested in Trump being exonerated from all this Epstein stuff. I am just making the logical prediction as somebody who has sorted through much more of the Epstein files than I would have ever cared to have had to let you know from what I've seen, the only stuff out there that implicates Trump directly are anonymous tips and third-party reports. Those are not credible. I personally don't actually even believe them. I think the timing of when they were admitted was suspicious, too coincidental for my liking, and the story centered around some of them are absurd, to be honest with you. That's my personal stance on that, though. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. We demand and we must get the other half of those Epstein files released, and God only knows at this point, for real, truly, God only knows what's in that other half of the Epstein files. But that's the story there. And I will double down a little bit on it, though, and I will remind everybody here. I wrote this down for reference. Trump, according to reports, there's two different timelines here that, when it comes to the mid-2000s and when Trump did sever ties with Jeffrey Epstein. First and foremost, the first report is that Trump officially started really severing his ties with Jeffrey Epstein in 2003 after a report came in from an 18-year-old beautician when she came back freaking out after giving Jeffrey Epstein a massage, and she reported this to one of the managers at Trump's, I believe it was Mar-a-Lago. She reported to the manager that Epstein had tried to ask her for sexual relations. Now, this was an 18-year-old girl, but nevertheless, it was an inappropriate thing for Epstein to do in the context of a professional atmosphere to some degree, because this was a beautician offering a massage. And so, according to that report, the manager then faxed this complaint directly to President Trump, who responded with a good letter, kick him out. This was in 2003. However, one of the things that conflicts this a little bit doesn't like conflict it to the point where it's inaccurate or where you can say that's not true. But one of the small problems is Epstein's official account at Mar-a-Lago did not officially close out until October of 2007. And so somewhere in between 03 and 07, you have something going on. Epstein is reportedly kicked out of Mar-a-Lago in 2003 or kicked out of wherever this was taking place, but his account wasn't closed out until 07. And then, of course, in 06, we now have this report from the Palm Beach police chief that Trump called in elated that there was an investigation happening into Epstein. According to this police chief, Trump was delighted and even helped the police chief out by pointing to Ghislaine Maxwell as the real evil one. Furthermore, there is some testimony here that surfaced from, I believe, 2009, from a lawyer. I wrote down his name, Bradley Edwards, a Florida lawyer who represented a lot of Epstein's victims in the first case that Epstein caught, where he was found guilty ultimately. And according to Bradley Edwards, he openly said at this time, and this was on a YouTube video I saw from literally 2009 or 2010, so it wasn't like it just came out very recently to defend Trump. He said at this time that Trump was actually the only big name that was willing to cooperate with him upon him calling Trump. Trump actually gave him the full time of day and literally said, take as much time as you need, ask me anything. And he said Trump was the most willing out of any big name that he called to share everything, and even like shared a lot of crucial information with him about Jeffrey Epstein. So that was actually part of the reason why I made that prediction last year that Trump wouldn't be implicated, because that's just a real testimony from a lawyer back in 2009 or 2010 rather, before there would have been a need for the optics of defending Trump if you're a MAGA Republican, for instance. So there's a lot that goes into this, but I do have all that down. I will say, like I said, to wrap up that part of the story here with Epstein, that this 06 story does not exonerate Trump. MAGA's very excited about it. Oh, but Trump called in very excited that they were investigating Epstein. It's like, all right, chill out. I believe that testimony. It's a police chief giving it. He gave that testimony in 2019 to the FBI. I believe that, but it's not the smoking gun of exoneration either that MAGA wants it to be. And I'm normally not a fence rider, but I'm just going to say that. I'm going to not take either side here. The liberals, of course, don't want to acknowledge it at all. This is a real story. I believe this. This is a sworn statement from a police chief in 2019, okay? It is what it is. That's where we're at with it. My prediction still stands. I feel slightly more vindicated and validated after reading that article, because I made that prediction last May that Trump wasn't guilty of what the liberals want him to be. And that's a tough pill for liberals to swallow, but there's tough pills for MAGA to swallow too. And we're going to get to that in a second here, because, this Trump DOJ, they're dropping the ball. They've been dropping the ball. At this point, they're actively engaged in a cover-up, or they were. Now they're failing miserably, which makes them look even worse. And on top of it, now you have Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, a Republican and Democrat, forming an alliance to rally against the Trump DOJ and force them to follow the rules of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, because this DOJ tried to release all of these files while still redacting the names of suspects that they shouldn't have been. So I'm going to get to that in 1 second. I see some chats have come in, though. I'll take a look at some of the chats. Please, if you're enjoying this, be sure to give this stream a like, because it helps the stream perform better in the YouTube algorithm, which already despises this America First channel. Also, subscribe to American Advocates if you haven't already. All right, let's see what we got here. Liked and subscribed, says Valiant Thor. Thank you, Valiant Thor. I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. All right, let me scroll up. I'll take a look at some comments before I move on to the third segment of this Epstein story here. Huey says, that's not facts, that's your feelings. Well, these are statements. These are official statements. The stuff, Huey, that you want to go off of are literally anonymous tips, many of which were turned in. Well, there really wasn't that many, but the one that everybody, the liberal side, wants to cite as, implicating Trump, apparently having something to do with a 12-year-old girl before she was beheaded. I don't buy that story. Listen. It's a crazy enough story as it is, let alone the fact that it was an anonymous fucking tip turned into a tip hotline, which was then included in the Epstein files because someone bothered to say it. At the time that this hotline was up, I could have literally said, hey, I could have called in and said, hey, there's this guy who goes by the username HueyX5i on YouTube. Yeah, I just want to let you know he became friends with Jeffrey Epstein via Xbox Live in 2012. And he visited Epstein Island, and they sliced off children's fingers and barbecued them and ate them, and then they disposed of the child. And your name, Huey, would have been in the Epstein files just because I decided to be a fucking jackass and do that. That's literally how that works. That's what the anonymous tip hotline was, okay? So just so you have a frame of reference here, that's how stupid that is. And that's why I don't buy that, okay? That's why I'm not buying that. And Trump was his best friend for a decade before Slow Joe. Who's best friend? Epstein? Yeah, in the 90s. Epstein, we're going to go over some history in the 90s with Epstein because Les Wexner's name was unredacted in the files, and I'm going to go right into that story in just a second here. Trump is going a long way to make it look like he's guilty. Just the actions of him dealing with Maxwell look bad. Well, Huey, now that I almost agree with you on. This defies all logic to me when it comes to Trump. Trump actually does have good instincts when it comes to press and media and public attention. He's good at that. So it defies all logic, in all honesty, that Trump has taken this very unpopular stance when it comes to the Epstein files. And really, it all goes back to what I've stated in the past on this channel now multiple times. Trump may not be found ever guilty of anything that some of these other people in the Epstein files were up to, because there's been statements saying that Trump never took any massages. There's been statements saying that Trump never visited the island. Now there's these statements coming in now from the police chief that he called to celebrate an investigation into Epstein in 2006. He kicked Epstein out in 2003. Epstein's account was closed in 2007, et cetera, et cetera. But Trump, no doubt, is up to no good in his approach when it comes to these Epstein files, originally trying to call these a hoax, right? On top of that, as I've stated, Epstein was a networker, and his island wasn't for what everybody wants to think that it was, in all honesty, though that may have played a part, the satanic occult stuff. Sure, throw that in there. Maybe that was a part of it, I guess. But people can't see the forest through the trees, which I've said on this channel. And this island was an island of ritualistic nonsense that was used really to incriminate powerful elites for future blackmail purposes so that they could control wealthy, powerful people. And so all of these names that pop up that are guilty in the Epstein files, it seems like this administration is keen on protecting them, or they at least were keen on protecting them for as long as they could, before, of course, Congress literally united in almost unanimous fashion to force the Epstein Files Transparency Act to hit Trump's desk, where, of course, he then had to sign that, because vetoing it would have looked absurd. Only one person in Congress voted no on the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which is hilarious. But yeah, so that's what it seems like to me. It does seem like that. And I'll use that to springboard into this. This is the abomination that we're now dealing with when it comes to the Trump DOJ. The Epstein Files Transparency Act explicitly says that they cannot redact names that should not be redacted, only the names of actual victims. And now the DOJ, of course, has not come out and made any official statements on what they consider a victim to be, but everyone is quickly developing the hypothesis here that the DOJ is cleverly working into the victim category here the names of very wealthy, powerful elites who pop up in these Epstein files that would have wound up being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein. Because, yeah, they're a victim of blackmail then. And so this is not confirmed. The DOJ has not made that as an official statement, nor will they ever admit to that, I think. But it does go to show when you look at the names that are being unredacted now after Thomas, Massie, and Ro Khanna literally had to come back together to write another letter of warning to the DOJ to remind them of this rule and force them to unredact these names. It's like, well, when you look at the names and you do some research on these names, what else am I supposed to believe? Am I supposed to believe that the DOJ like earnestly thought these people were victims on Epstein Island? Because they weren't. And it starts with Les Wexner. Hang on, let me sip some water. Problem with this talking so long is your mouth dries out. Les Wexner. There are two prominent names that you should really know when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. Les Wexner and Leon Black. And I already did a full episode on this and who these people were when it came to Jeffrey Epstein. But I'll tell you this right away. When it comes to Les Wexner is literally the guy, in my opinion, that really allowed Jeffrey Epstein to become who he was all across the globe. Les Wexner met Jeffrey Epstein in 1986. And at some point, for some reason, very quickly, within 5 years, he decided that Jeffrey Epstein was so good at math and just had such a natural understanding of money that he appointed Jeffrey Epstein as his power of attorney over all of his finances, giving Epstein literally control over the Wexner Foundation and therefore his entire empire. Under this power of attorney, Epstein could literally move checks back and forth, money wherever he deemed fit, pay employees, hire and fire employees. Epstein had near complete control over Wexner's entire estate, basically. And this was just after 5 years of meeting Epstein. Wexner also owns a company, I believe it's called Limited, and as a result, he owns a company called Victoria's Secret. Now, these are hypotheses still. This is still a theory at this point, but I think most people can instantly connect the dots there when it comes to Victoria's Secret, Les Wexner, billions of dollars, Jeffrey Epstein, Little St. James Island, Ghislaine Maxwell, etc., etc. And so when you connect all of those dots, you quickly understand just how important Les Wexner was to Jeffrey Epstein, and vice versa, as over time, Jeffrey Epstein wound up using all of his networking connections and abilities to help network these famous and wealthy people with other wealthy, powerful people across the world. The Wexner Foundation, of course, wound up giving at one point $2.3 billion, I believe it was, to Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister. And that's possibly where we have some of the theories that come in where Epstein was Israeli defense or some sort of Israeli intelligence agent, Mossad possibly, various other communities, possibly MI6 from the UK, CIA right here at home as well. And that's really what it all comes down to. Les Wexner's name, the Trump DOJ, originally tried to redact it. And I don't know why, because Les Wexner's name, if you're involved, if you've done research on the Epstein files for real, rather than being a typical headline reader where you just read liberal headlines praying and hoping that Trump gets ousted out of office over this, if you actually look into this for real, Les Wexner's name is not new. We've known about this for a long time now. Nevertheless, the DOJ wanted to redact this for some reason, and Thomas, Massie, and Ro Khanna have forced this name to be unredacted, and now very likely there's going to be investigations into some of these names. Now, on top of that, we have another name that hit the books here, Lesley Groff. There's not too much here on Lesley Groff that I was able to discover tonight, but I will do more extensive research on her for the future. And when it comes to Lesley Groff, it seems like she managed a lot of stuff for Jeffrey Epstein in New York City, of course, where Jeffrey Epstein had a home. It seems like she was in charge of booking various trips and traveling for Jeffrey Epstein, flights, massages from what I saw. Lesley Groff was unfortunately completely exonerated, but it seems like she played a smaller Ghislaine Maxwell type role, minus perhaps the trafficking element, which she adamantly denies ever having any knowledge of or participating in. Groff insists that she only ever booked flights for Epstein. She organized a lot of stuff for him in New York City, his travels, and she did book massages, I believe I remember reading, but that she had no idea what those entailed or what the environment was like or the circumstances of them, whether or not the girls were of age or underage, regardless. So Lesley Groff's name has been unredacted as well. And then finally, this is a big name here, Jean-Luc Brunel. This guy I found very fascinating. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell, there's a lot of comparisons you can draw between this guy, Jean-Luc Brunel, and Ghislaine Maxwell. Jean-Luc Brunel has a very fascinating story to him. He's dead now. He killed himself in prison, actually, in 2022, death by hanging. And this happened in a French prison where, conveniently, French prisons consider it a violation of inmate privacy to have cameras in the cells. So I won't say for sure that this is a conspiracy theory. I'll leave that to your own conclusion. But I do find it a very ironic, kind of circumstance here where he wound up killing himself just a few years after Epstein did, using the same methods. And there's been no official recordings released centered around his death. Now, Jean-Luc Brunel was sort of the international Ghislaine Maxwell, according to the research I was able to do here. And his name was originally redacted by the Trump DOJ and has now been unredacted via the efforts of Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna. So Jean-Luc Brunel had a modeling agency, according to the research I did. I wrote it down here. He used this modeling agency as a front, apparently, promising all of these young girls that came to him trips to Paris, jobs in Paris, and giving them cash and all of this extra stuff, all of this incentive. You're going to be a model. And under that guise, he would then fulfill orders that were sent to him by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein for the island. They referred to these girls as Pop-Tarts, apparently, according to the reports I was able to read. And Epstein would send an order out. I need 3 blonde hair, blue-eyed girls. And Jean-Luc Brunel would apparently fulfill that order. So he was the international Ghislaine, because on that side of the world, you had him. And then on this side of the world, it seems like Ghislaine Maxwell was more focused domestically here in the Western Hemisphere. She would scout out places like Mar-a-Lago, for instance. She would scout out other nightclubs across America, etc., looking for girls the same way that Jean-Luc Brunel was looking for them over in France, using his modeling agency as a front to do so. And Jean-Luc Brunel wound up, of course, getting accused of rape at some point, and the French authorities weren't having it. So that's when they arrested him, and they were in the process of charging him of these crimes when he killed himself in his prison cell. And the conspiracy and controversy around his death actually is the fact that he, according to reports that I was able to find, he had tried hanging himself multiple times. And despite that, was never put on suicide watch. And then eventually he succeeded in killing himself, according to reports, in his prison cell. So that's the conspiracy. That's the controversy centered around this guy, and his death, of course, as well. It's very interesting. Even more interesting that these were some of the names that the Trump Department of Justice decided to try to redact at first. So that's where we're at with that. Please be sure to like this stream, like I said, if you haven't already. It really helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. Be sure to subscribe to American Advocate if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, especially if it's not your first time being here. But all of that, well, actually, I'll take a look at some chats real quick before I move on to the final statement and story here that I want to discuss, centered around the Trump DOJ and the Epstein Files release. Virginia Giuffre was 16 when she was working at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, that could be very likely true. I have to look into that more. Virginia Giuffre, though, is an interesting one. A lot of people shy away from saying this, but I don't. She's not to be trusted. She was a chronic liar, and a lot of her stories are just patently false. They've actually been proven false. So, as sad as it may be, her circumstances, she, of course, is dead now, too, which is suspicious. As sad as it all may be, her statements, unfortunately, are somewhat unreliable because some of her statements have been proven false. What's Crystal saying? He'll be removed from all the... No, yeah, Trump's not getting removed. Bad Bunny is shit. Yeah, hey, I agree. But that has nothing to do with the topic tonight. Limited Brands is a pretty good company to work for, but he sucks. Are you talking about, is Limited Brands that's Les Wexner's company, Limited? Yeah, under that I believe is the umbrella. It's the umbrella for Victoria's Secret, but it's still, it all works together very well. Wes Flexner, who's that? No one's defending Biden. Yeah, well, right. When it comes to Biden, the fact of the matter is the liberals don't have any high ground to stand on with this either. So I don't ever let them get away with that, because there's really there is no defense for Biden. He didn't even mention Epstein. He couldn't have been bothered. And to me, that really does reflect the whole perspective here centered around Epstein and the files. This is only important to people right now because they want Trump to be guilty. They don't actually care about the child predatory stuff, in truth. This is all virtue signaling in the most disgusting degree. And it's all just about, can we get Trump on this? I hate Trump so much, I'll use these circumstances to try to weave this into President Donald Trump. So there is no moral high ground here for either side to be standing on. The liberals, they managed to go all of Biden's term without any of this stuff being released. And then their only argument is, well, Biden didn't campaign on it. And it's like, okay, great. So you're telling me that you've suspected this child predatory ring happening, this pedophile ring happening globally for all of these years now, but you're not bothered that Biden did nothing about it because, well, he never said he would, and that makes it okay then. It's like, where's the logic in that? So no, there's no high ground where the liberals can stand on this either. But at the same time, you got to recognize this DOJ is also trying to cover this up, and they've been trying to cover this up. This is a bipartisan cover-up overall, and now we're seeing all these weird power dynamics come into play where Congress unites against this administration in almost unanimous fashion. This DOJ is corrupt and is trying to cover it up. Pam Bondi's a liar. That leads me into actually what I wanted to say here. This truly is a Trump DOJ disaster. And this is where MAGA is going to have a hard time hearing this, but I'm going to say it regardless, because you cannot sit on either side of this aisle and defend your party at this point. It should be very clear to everybody what this world actually is right now, or what it at least was when Epstein was alive, and very likely large remnants of that still exist. This world is disgusting. This system is beyond broken. And very likely at the root of this are several different intelligence agencies and world leaders participating in all of this. And they do so at our expense. Our taxpayer money goes to fund this sick shit. On top of that, we're not represented by these people anymore, if you really think about it. How many people do you know in office right now? Be honest. If you're a liberal especially, be honest with yourself. Don't tell me you know Democrats that represent you that well. I feel like when it comes to Epstein, at the very least, it is Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ro Khanna. Two Republicans, one Democrat. That's about it. All the other Democrats have jumped on this now because of Trump, but they were quiet about this during the Biden administration. So the real ones are really three of them. That's it. And one of them's gone because Trump, I don't want to say bullied her out of office because that's pathetic, and I don't respect Marjorie Taylor Greene's decision to just throw in the towel, but she's gone. She left. She retired. She couldn't handle the heat. Trump came down on her hard. She's done. So it's Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, really. There's two real ones, one for each side of the aisle, and that's it. The rest of these guys, they're phony. Congress came together for this, but they did so for optics. It was all politics for Congress, minus Thomas Massie and minus Ro Khanna. They're the only two that I get a sense actually gives a shit about this. And on top of that, you have these elites that have been doing this. They've been getting away with this for decades. And this is just how the world works. What we're really getting insight to right now across the globe is how the world has actually been working and operating for decades. Decades now. And that's why this DOJ was so that's why the Biden administration wanted nothing to do with this. They never fucking mentioned this shit. Trump campaigned, he didn't campaign on it, but he was asked during his campaign if he would release it. Of course, he answered as a populist. He knew what the right answer was. He has good instincts as a populist. He said, yeah, I consider it. Well, we held him to it to some degree, to the point of where he couldn't backtrack on it, though he tried. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That cabinet meeting back in May will be a cabinet meeting I remember forever, because that's where the narrative on the right switched in that meeting, in that administration. Are you still talking about that Jeffrey Epstein, that creep? I'll never forget that, because that was when I looked at that and I realized this is bigger than a party. This is bigger than any one party. This is just corruption, evil, wickedness, all being exposed, and both sides know it, and both sides are terrified to allow this information out. In the words of Speaker Mike Johnson himself, when the Epstein Files Transparency Act was heading to President Donald Trump's desk to be signed, he literally said something. I can't quote him from memory directly. He said something along the lines of, it is a tragedy or something of this effect because it is going to burn down our political institutions as we know it. Something along that effect is what Speaker Mike Johnson said. And since then, Trump has even gone on to say that he thinks it's a tragedy and that he thinks it's sad to see. And he's defended Bill Clinton now. So there is no right or wrong side here at this point. And that's not a fence sitter take. That's a take. That's the side. I'm on the American people's side on this. And truthfully, we should all be uniting together at this point, at least in that. There's one thing I want unity for. I do not want to unify with liberals at all. I do not agree with liberal ideology on anything, with the exception of the Epstein Files, if we all come together for that. And that, of course, would mean getting justice when it comes to all of them, Democrats, Republicans alike. Burn the fucking system down at this point. I think that's a sentiment that most people in the world could understand. And that's where I'm at with that. But we have now Pam Bondi. She's in serious trouble, I think. I think Kash Patel, Pam Bondi are both in serious trouble. Pam Bondi on record saying that the trafficking ring wasn't really a thing. He trafficked them to himself only. We know that's false. Pam Bondi must have also known that was false when she made that statement. She had the files, but she testified to that. She said, all kinds of stuff. All the files never even existed. There was no client list. There was no trafficking ring. He was a sick creep who lived on an island. He trafficked these girls to himself. Liar. And I've hated Pam Bondi since pretty much month one. I knew she was weak and didn't have what it takes, and I've been proven nothing but right on that as well. Kash Patel, another example here, and another big disgrace. What is Kash Patel doing as the FBI director? What is he even doing? He goes on podcasts with his girlfriend, who's a Jew, but decided she's going to be an American country singer. Like, how does that even make sense? They go on podcasts to flaunt their beautiful relationship. Meanwhile, Kash Patel doesn't do anything, and Kash Patel says, I looked at the files, and if there was anybody worth investigating and anybody worth arresting, I would do it. And then he didn't do any of it. And now we're looking at these files, and a lot of it is a nothing burger, to be honest with you, when it comes to direct implications. There's a lot of names, but there's a lot to sort through and a lot of credibility issues in the files and online because of AI slop, but also because, like I stated earlier, anonymous tips that have come in that aren't reliable or credible, third-party accounts that wouldn't count for shit in court. Nevertheless, I think we can all agree, anybody who's read these files, I'm looking at some of these names. I'm looking at Les Wexner. I'm looking at Lesley Groff. I'm looking at, all these names popping up. And a lot of them I'm going, yeah, that's worth investigating. But where are those investigations here in America? Nowhere to be found. Where are the arrests? Nowhere to be found. Where are the politicians here in America disgraced, stepping out of the public spotlight, stepping down from their positions? Nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, over in the United Kingdom, a country that I like to shit all over recently because I believe they're losing their Western values and ideals over time, they arrest 12,000 people of their own people every year for social media posts. They are censoring their free speech. They've given up on their version of the Second Amendment rights. I can't stand that country. Yet they're doing a better job with all of this. Peter Mandelson over there was implicated in these files in a pretty heavy way. His guilt's not been proven yet, but he's already stepped down. He's lost lordship over there. Now Keir Starmer, the prime minister, who decided to appoint Peter Mandelson over there with proven foreknowledge of Peter Mandelson's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, his career's now on the line. Piers Morgan calling for Keir Starmer to step down. A lot of the country calling for Keir Starmer to step down. Keir Starmer is feeling the pressure. Where is that over here? Where's any of that happening over here? Instead, we have Assistant Attorney General Todd Blanche going on his ex. Todd Blanche, by the way, a lifelong New York Democrat who was for some reason appointed into this administration after representing Trump for all of 2 years during the Biden regime's lawfare. That's Todd Blanche. I think he's a mole, but that's just my personal opinion. I think he is sabotaging the DOJ as a whole. A lifelong Democrat became a Republican a year and a half ago. Now he's the assistant attorney general for this administration. Well, Todd Blanche now is all over X arguing with Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, the two guys that I just stated I think are the only genuine ones out there when it comes to these files. He's arguing left and right with Thomas Massie. Oh, this doesn't mean that, and the DOJ's been transparent here, and there's nothing in these files. You're full of, he's not saying you're full of shit, but essentially that's what he's saying. They're going back and forth on X. Todd Blanche is insisting that these files, there's nothing to them. There's no need for prosecutions or investigations. And so this whole DOJ, Dan Bongino, that's who else I wanted to talk about real quick. Dan Bongino now leaves, he quits. Then he has the nerve to call us the black pillars and doomers when he's part of the reason we're more black-pilled and doomer-pilled than ever before. We counted on people like Dan Bongino, who seemed raw and genuine on his podcast, and probably was at that time before he knew what he was getting into, to go in there and rattle the cages, bring hell. Bring retribution down on all these fuckers. Dan Bongino's persona, in large part, was centered around the Epstein Files. Now he's quit. He cries about missing his wife on his first episode back on his podcast. Oh, I missed my wife so bad. What did you think the job was going to be, Dan? And then on top of it, he says, oh, we can't get anything done because the black pillars and the doomers that are out there, they're never happy with anything. Here's a list of all of our accomplishments. We've arrested 4,000 no-name drug dealers. Good job. Wow. That's what I expect out of every DOJ from every administration. But good job. Wow. You did the bare minimum. The border he cites, he takes credit for on his podcast. He takes credit for all of these things that are good accomplishments, but nothing like what we were promised. We were promised Epstein Files and deep state arrests. We've only gotten half of the files. They're largely redacted when many of those redactions shouldn't be redacted. And we've gotten no deep state arrests. Now Dan Bongino quits. He quits that job, complains about people complaining, but he quits that job as deputy director of the FBI, where he could actually enact some of the changes that he said he wanted in his podcast in 2023. He quits that job to complain, so he could complain about people complaining. Make it fucking make sense. This whole DOJ is rotten, and the bottleneck in it is Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, etc. You very likely have Todd Blanche, who I don't trust at all. He's a lifelong Democrat. You have Pam Bondi, who doesn't want to do anything. She seems content to sit back and let Todd Blanche do all of the work, because I think she wants Todd Blanche to be the fall guy for future prosecutions that could be levied against her if Democrats regain control. But she's openly, in my opinion, I can't say this for sure, I have to say this very likely, lied. She's very likely lied about the Epstein Files. So is Kash Patel, very likely lied. And so it's all a nightmare. It's all a PR disaster for this administration. And the only good thing you can say is that it's because of this administration that we've even gotten half of the files. Because again, it is true. We never got shit under Biden, and we were never going to get shit under Biden. Nobody cared about the Epstein Files under Biden. That was all by design. So that's the only good thing you can say. But the fact of the matter is, this is a disaster for this Trump DOJ. And if I'm being straight up honest with you, if it keeps going this course and they keep playing the game like this, I secretly, halfway at least, would actually like to see charges brought up against some of these DOJ fuckers. I really would. I really, truly would. Because deep state arrests and the Epstein Files were pretty much the job that we wanted out of them. And we've gotten a half-baked job of the Epstein Files and no deep state arrest. It's a disgrace. It is truly a disgrace. I'm going to take a look at some comments here. Sip some water again. Do I support arresting Trump? No. Not right now, at least. For what? Bongino was a grifter from the beginning of his podcast. He picked a side that he knew he could make a shitload of money. I don't believe that. I actually believe there was some sincerity to Dan Bongino in the early 2020s. There's no way he could have foreseen becoming deputy director of the FBI. I certainly don't think he did it for that role. The fact of the matter is, when it comes to Dan Bongino and deputy director, that was like a demotion in pay for him. So I think he went in with good intent, but I do believe that our DOJ, our system, regardless of affiliation at this point, our system is so corrupt that I believe Dan Bongino didn't really know what he was getting into until he got there. And then I think you hear that story all the time. We vote for the president who goes into the Oval Office and starts signing paperwork to fill his campaign promises. You hear this all the time. And then people walk in with briefcases and sunglasses and trench coats. They walk in and they sit down with the president in a private meeting and they tell him how things actually work. And then we get none of the promises because all of a sudden the president realizes just how the world works. I think that's an example of what Dan Bongino went through, to be honest with you. And I think it ties into the fact that, once again, Bongino's personality was largely centered around the Epstein files, and it goes back to say that Epstein I can't prove this yet, but this conspiracy holds a lot more weight and credibility nowadays. Epstein was very likely intelligence. He very likely worked for, like I said, CIA, MI6, Mossad, maybe even more. And I believe truly at the heart of the problems of this world, or a large part of that, would be from these intelligence communities. I think that they have allied themselves in some cases to work together for the detriment of mankind in a lot of ways to fulfill a wicked agenda. Epstein was a networker and he had a lot of powerful people in his back pocket. So Dan Bongino was never going to probably be able to fulfill any meaningful purpose out of that deputy director role. Nevertheless, I can't respect a guy who just throws in the towel and quits out of fear or whatever else was surrounding him at that time. Then goes on the first episode to cry about how much he missed his wife. Like, give me a break, man. This country needs very strong men to rise up and take these positions to really change the course of where everything's heading. And Dan Bongino should have been that guy, and he wasn't. So I can't respect that. I cannot respect it. You think the government will hold the government accountable, says Leonard Cook 4444. Good question. No, not currently, but I'll tell you this. This is something I meant to say anyway. I believe there is an opportunity, at the very least, for politicians running in these upcoming midterms, but especially in 2028. I believe whichever side figures this out first will have the best chance of winning. You run not just on economic populism, because that's how you win elections overall, because Americans vote for what will impact their wallets. That's truly what matters to me the most. But law and order and justice, I've been prioritizing very high up lately. So I think in the future, whoever runs for these positions in government under the guise of prosecuting Epstein criminals, prosecuting anybody, I don't care. At this point, I don't give a shit. I'm conservative, like I said, but I do not care. If anybody runs on prosecuting somebody like a Pam Bondi or a Kash Patel, if an investigation points to the fact that we should, I think that's a shoo-in for winning elections in the future. I really do. Because I think at this point, the American people in general feel so starved for justice. The liberals, of course, have jumped on the Epstein bandwagon. They're going to be outraged that they're not getting justice. And in principle, rightfully so, because Americans and the world, for that matter, and the victims deserve justice. And then on the right, we're not getting the justice either. We wanted the deep state arrests, and part of that deep state, a large part of it, is tied in with Epstein as well. So I think there's a opportunity here for a lot of future politicians to run on the lack of justice that we're getting now. But currently, no. Nobody in this government is going to hold anybody accountable. Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna are only two people at the end of the day. So yeah. And yeah, that's black-pilled, but it's true. I mean, let's be honest. Where do you think they got the kids? I just explained that earlier. What's your name? Crystal. I explained that earlier. It seems likely that it's a combination of a few things. Ghislaine Maxwell would have been scouting domestically for them here in the Western Hemisphere. There was a guy his name was Un-Redacted recently by force at the hands of Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna. Jean-Luc Brunel. He used a modeling agency over in internationally in the eastern part of the world. A French modeling agency as a front to recruit girls as well. So you had both sides of the planet being covered essentially for Epstein, and very likely that's how. Also, I stated earlier, I explained some of the origin story between Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein. Les Wexner, of course, owning Limited, and as a result, owning Victoria's Secret. This is unconfirmed, but you can connect the dots very easily there and assume, I think rightfully so, that Victoria's Secret might have also played a part, because Jeffrey Epstein is on record even bragging that he could obtain Victoria's Secret models if he wanted. So something to that effect, at least. Don't directly quote him or me on that, but he was bragging about that in the past. So those are kind of the trifecta in my mind. Victoria's Secret, the French modeling agency over there in the other side of the world, and Ghislaine Maxwell moving across this Western Hemisphere to various different nightclubs and resorts to also do some scouting. That's where Epstein would have got his girls from. Pam Blondie says ES103. Yeah, she's a disgrace. I'll take a look here. Do you care for the truth and morality, or do you care about protecting Trump? I am doing neither. I'm just stating what I believe to be facts or strong hunches here is what I'm going off of. You may not like what I'm saying, but it really doesn't matter what you like. Do you think they came from beauty pageants? Well, yeah, and Victoria's Secret used to host those, and so did the French modeling agent would promise those to some of the girls. Jean-Luc Brunel, he used to promise gigs in Paris and abundance in cash, etc. So it could be. That's why Ukraine is their favorite country. Create war. War makes orphans. Orphans can be bought and sold with no paper trail. Yeah, that's pretty dark, but there could be something to that as well. I was outraged that people didn't care about the kids getting set. Well, to be honest with you, Leonard Cook, I'm not convinced on that part yet. It's not that that's not outrageous. If that was happening, then that's truly despicable. But as of right now, I'm focused on who Epstein was, what his island was used for, and people want to focus on the occult stuff. They want to focus on the satanic stuff, but a lot of that is still alleged, in all honesty. When there's proof of that, if there's proof of that, I'll cover that because that's outrageous. And there's a strengthening case building now centered around some stuff. This stream started off with Squidman. I don't know if he's still here, talking about how he can't look at beef jerky the same. So there's stuff emerging now, but I'm not going to report on that and go into detail on that just yet because you can't prove it just yet. There's stuff being stated in these files, but I'm not going to I'm going off of concrete stuff. The concrete fact of the matter is Epstein was a networker. He knew a lot of powerful elites. The more the merrier, the more powerful people he could know, befriend, and put in compromising positions in his island for future blackmail, the better. And it really is that simple at face value. It's all complex, and its purpose is very complex. But at face value, that is what it was. It was a blackmailing operation, in my opinion, and it very likely is tied to intelligence agents, like I said. For the use of just controlling powerful people across the world. It's not to downplay the severity of the depraved actions that were taking place on that island. It's disgusting what Epstein did. But, a lot of people only focus on the emotional stuff. I'm here to focus on the logical stuff, which is who was Epstein and what was his purpose. If and with proof of that other stuff, I'll cover it though. Trust me. Ron Goldberger. A union held together by the honest fulfillment of its promises is flexible and resilient. One held together by illogical legal precedents and the threat of force is an illusion. That persists only until the power behind it becomes intolerable. Well, that's the truth, honestly. And the fact of the matter is, true change in any area of life, in your personal areas of life, anywhere. Oh, I got a super chat too. Did I miss that? Stop everything. 2009 Lifeguard. Hey, welcome to the stream again, 2009 Lifeguard. Glad to have you back. I really appreciate that. I think that's the first super chat I've gotten from you specifically for the 99-cent super chat. I really appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much. Anyways, the fact of the matter is true change only comes when you decide you can no longer tolerate something. And that is true. That's very true. And that does kind of go back to that previous chatter who said, do you think the government is going to hold the government accountable? The answer currently is no. I think there's an opportunity for some politicians to capitalize on it, and I hope they do. But they need to know if they're going to capitalize on running and campaigning on justice over this Epstein stuff and deep state arrests, that they better fucking fulfill it. Because I'll tell you this right now. One of the things one of the things you have to be aware of is we're currently living in times right now. The economy is still not great for the everyday American. Trump's improved the economy a lot if you're wealthy or if you're a business, and that's not a bad thing. But if you're an everyday American, you're noticing the cost of living going up still. I've noticed prices increasing in my grocery stores. I've noticed packaging decreasing once again. So we're still undergoing some forms of shrinkflation. Corporate greed plays a part in that because I think they are price gouging. And our cost of living has not gotten better when it comes to consumer prices. The housing market still sucks. Rent is still outrageous, although it has gone down. And so when you have that, and then you combine it with the fact that on the other end of the spectrum here, there's a two-tiered justice system, and only poor people seem to be facing law and order and consequences for their actions, while these wealthy, powerful elites not only avoid consequences, but are actively shielded from them. That's how you get a revolution started, in all honesty. And Trump is playing with fire, in my opinion, by doing that. I don't advocate for a revolution. That would be violence. And I actually don't think we're at a point where we need a revolution in this country. I still am pretty optimistic, maybe naively so, but I think we can change this. I just think it's going to take a lot of time. And I think the formula that's needed here is we need better people running for office. And we need a lot of stuff to change. It is going to take a small miracle, but Trump is playing with fire, in my opinion, on both fronts. And that's why all of his campaign promises are infinitely more popular than he is currently. It would be nice if he was fulfilling a lot of those. Started off strong. First 2 months of his presidency were great, but he's really lost his way. And it's not something to be trifled. We're not to be trifled with as American people. No people group is to be trifled with. No country's citizens should be trifled with. And that's kind of what you're doing, by not granting the people justice, the perception of justice even. We're not getting that. So it's interesting, very interesting. The outrage is building. And I'm not a big outrage culture guy. I think I can't stand the virtue signaling outrage that exists over a lot of bullshit out there. But over something like this and what I'm reading in these files, the outrage is deserved. Mark Smith, of course. Mark Smith, your 401k is doing fantastic, exactly. But that's not for most Americans aren't experiencing that. If you're a boomer, you bought your house for $18,000, it's worth $580,000. You're pulling equity out now to buy a second vacation home in Florida. Your 401k's been in the stock market for years. You're fucking killing it. Yeah. The economy has improved under Trump, marginally so, and it's improved for wealthy people and boomers. Trump wants the housing market prices to stay high for boomers. If you're my age or younger even, it's not good right now. That's just facts. Crystal Knight says most people don't have a 401k. Exactly. I mean, I own my own business, so I don't have a 401k either. But I have traded in the stock market. I made a lot of money after the April 4th tariff dips because I knew the liberals were being stupid about those tariffs, and I knew it was just a short-term dip. So I capitalized. I bought NVIDIA, and I made a lot of money. I bought NVIDIA at 96 a share, and I cashed out at literally double, almost double, 180. So I made money on the stock market, but I'm not rich, so it's not like I put in like 1.2 million into NVIDIA. If I had that money, I would have, because I knew it was going to happen. But I made some money. I had some fun, but I don't have a 401k. I'm on the youngest end of the millennial spectrum. I'm still dealing with the housing market costs myself. I'm dealing with a bunch of issues, consumer prices, like I said. So yeah, the stock market going up, wonderful, I guess. I've made a few grand on it, but nothing life-changing. I don't have a 401k, so it's going well for boomers, yes, but that's about it. And that's an error. That's an error on Trump's part. To take the boomer side over young people, we need to change that. We need to flip that script in this country, and I'll stand by that as I age as a millennial and as I become the boomer's age over the next 40 years of my life. I will still say that. Because I've experienced what it's like now to watch a generation like boomers who had it better than their parents and now have it better than their children. That is wholly unacceptable. It should always be about prioritizing the young generations because they are the fucking future. And this boomer greed and selfishness is despicable, in my opinion. And we cannot continue that. That's not healthy for a nation. boomers boomers are entitled to their 401ks and they should be enjoying life. Yes. But right now, millennials should be owning homes already. Gen Zers should be living in apartments affordably so and should be on the verge of owning a home and getting married. None of that's happening. And there's so many reasons that go into that. I'm not going to cover that this stream, but there's a lot of reasons that go into that. But the problem is only boomers are doing well right now. The average median home buyer 20 years ago was age 39. That average median home buyer now is 59 20 years later. So the same people buying homes 20 years ago are the same ones buying homes now. That's terrible. That's literally terrible. The kids are out of control. Ugh, boomer slop right there. You got your head twisted. Shut the fuck up, man. Hit the deceased line, will you? No tax on tips or overtime, says Mark. Hey, I'm all for that too, right? Like, that's a good thing out of the big, beautiful bill. So, God bless you all. God bless the good people in this world. Thank you, Leonard Cook. Appreciate you. Trump watched Bad Bunny instead of TPUSA. Well, dude, TPUSA was shit. I wasn't gonna watch that shit. Bad Bunny was shit too. Fuck that guy. You know, Bad Bunny looks like he wants to intentionally go to prison so he can get fucked in the ass by his cellmate. Fuck that guy. That's not a rapper. I don't like rap to begin with. I've always thought it's trashy. But at least I could respect Biggie, Tupac, you know, all those guys. The guys that were capable of violence. Not Bad Bunny. How is that a rapper? The people who call him a rapper should be ashamed of themselves. That guy's a disgrace. I mean, honestly. That halftime show was disgusting. But I wasn't going to watch TPUSA either. No, thank you. So I could see what Erica Kirk throwing more hats out to the crowd, wearing tight leather pants and jumping up and down the fireworks, and then seconds later holding a tissue up to her eyes. Oh, Charlie was such a good guy. Oh. No, thank you. No, thank you. Not for me. Not for me. We're getting priced out of our own society, says Leonard Cook. Yeah, we are. Yeah. Bad Bunny sucked. He did. He not only did he suck, but he objectively sucked. Do you know how many Spanish-speaking people I know who literally said, "Hey, I know you're saying that the Super Bowl halftime show should be in English because it's American football, it's our culture, it's our country," and they're like, whether or not I agree with that, they're like, I just want to let you know. I even had to put captions on because Bad Bunny speaks such shit Spanish that even Spanish-speaking people I know couldn't understand him. That fucking halftime show was ass. Everyone just needs to accept that. It was shit. There's now the panorama footage, people on their cell phones at the Super Bowl recording the crowd's reaction. There's like three people, stupid women, of course, kind of dancing. Everyone else just standing still looking in like dumbfoundedness. Rightfully so. That show sucked, okay? It's objectively true at this point. Everyone agrees that show sucked. It sucked. Only idiots are defending it. You guys are fucking haters, bro. Shut up. Go cry somewhere else. I love Bad Bunny, man. I just discovered him on Sunday. I don't know any of his songs. I can't tell you any of the lyrics, but his music's good, man. That's Puerto Rican culture, dude. I mean, he's practically an American. Shut up. My wife is Mexican and couldn't understand a word, says Alpha 2 Tango. Exactly. I'm not making this up when I say this. I've seen that account from like 18 different people on my Facebook. They're like, yeah, I speak Spanish. And like, I could only understand every fourth or fifth word. His Spanish, they called it Spanish slop. They said it's slop. They're like, I don't know what this guy speaks. Like, I had like two Hispanics reach out to me, and they said literally, they're like, I think he made up his own Spanish to speak. They literally said that. They're like, I think he made up his own version of Spanish. Like, okay, that makes sense. And it makes it even funnier for all the dumb white liberal bimbos out there all the liberal women full of suicidal empathy. They're like, listen, I think every halftime show should be in another language, okay? You should just learn that language, you American pig. How dare you assume that you only have to know English in your own country? Stupid fucking liberal women. It makes it even funnier that they want to pretend like this was a great show. They want to pretend like they somehow could understand Bad Bunny. They're like, it was a rap. He was rapping about unity. He was rapping. How do you know, bitch? Even Spanish-speaking people couldn't understand him. Like, what the fuck? I'm Mexican and I don't understand, says Joker's Wild. See? I'm telling you guys. Just look at the chats. Stop lying. You don't know any Spanish people. I do know. I do. Hispanic people, by the way. Don't be racist. I'm obviously kidding. I don't really care if you call them Spanish people. I don't give a shit at all. But no, of course I know Hispanic people. As a white person, I always have to say that. So that way I'm not a racist. I'm always like, hey, I have a black friend, by the way. But, I have no problem with Trump sharing that AI slop where Obama and Michelle and Barack are monkeys. I get to say, oh, I'm not a racist. I have a black friend. Same with Hispanic people. I get to say, hey, Bad Bunny fucking sucks. I'm not racist. I have a Hispanic friend. Okay? That's the law if you're a white man. Not that it really matters. In 2026, it's not even a law anymore. I could have none of those people be my friends, and I could still share my opinion, and it would be valid, okay? Because at the end of the day, I'm proud to be white. You're not a racist, but, says taking notes. Yep. Yeah, I don't even really disqualify my own statements anymore nowadays. I'm a man at this point. I say what I mean, and that's the end of it, 2009 lifeguard. Hey, man. He says, yet we all believe it was the most watched halftime in history, right? I almost do believe that. I think that's probably true just from the standpoint of it being a spectacle. Because everybody was tuning in with angst. The Republicans were like, this is going to be the most anti-ICE message ever. It's going to be super anti-Trump, which, to be fair, it really wasn't all that anti-Trump. But it was still a disgrace to this country. So I think everybody was watching it just because people were anticipating a spectacle. So I actually kind of believe that, though. But if you don't believe it, I don't blame you, because there are some questions. That shit was so funny with the Obama stuff, says Leonard Cook. It really was. Again, blown out of proportion. I mean, I already shared in my one stream, people compared George Bush to monkey faces all the time. I literally remember that being in grade school. I was like a little kid in like third grade, and George Bush, people were like, "Oh, look at his faces. This is the president of your country. He makes faces that look like a chimpanzee." People compared that all the time. It was never offensive then, So, I don't know. I'm with you, says JSKQ11B. Okay, can't say the username, but I appreciate you. Be sure to like the stream and subscribe to American Advocates if you haven't already. Your opinion can be valid and stupid at the same time. Thank you. It's only one of those, though. I'll let you decide which one it is, because I really don't care about your opinion of my opinion. Peter is mad. Yeah. Well, Peter Pan can fly on home now. He can go back to his husband. Hate will never make the U.S. great. Okay. I don't have a dog in this race. Facebook is stupid. Facebook is stupid. I agree with you there, Crystal. Facebook is for boomers, which is what makes it fun sometimes, though. I like going on Facebook just to see the boomers posting stuff, All right, let me catch up in the chats. Rolling Stone, yeah, I saw that. That's just manufactured out. They're just doing that for views. 2009 Lifeguard. Rolling Stone ranked it as the number 2 best halftime performance. Yeah, and they ranked it under Prince being the best. I would honestly say, and by the way, racist old me, according to the chatters, I would say, truthfully, Prince was the best halftime performance. Michael Jackson, another black guy, was number 2, okay? Not this crap that we saw with Bad Bunny. It should be literally Prince, then Michael Jackson. Rolling Stone did that literally, though, for views. They knew people would get triggered by it. That's why I didn't even pay attention. I didn't even click on the article. I didn't give them any attention. Gen X and Gen Z always complain boomers just suck. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, boomers never complain, ever. I've never had to hear anything from boomers complaining, Sleepy Watcher. I've never been told the sad woe is me story about boomers when they were 14, how they had to ride their bike uphill against the wind both ways in the snow barefoot. Never had I ever had to hear that. Never have I ever had to hear from boomers back when I worked a regular wagey job while I was cashing them out. I'm going to call the Better Business Bureau on you because this item was on the wrong shelf and it was for a cheaper price because it was on the wrong shelf, and now you won't honor it, and the customer's always right, you stupid fucking millennial bitch. And I'm gonna call the Better Business Bureau on you, and I'm gonna have your fucking job because you won't sell me the gallon milk for the price of the half-gallon milk where I found it on the shelf. That's a disgrace. Back in my day, people had respect for their elders. I don't know what's gotten into this young generation. Yeah, I've never had to hear that before, Sleepy Watcher. Get real, man. Boomers fucking literally bitch and moan about everything. They were the generation that had it the easiest. They're the only generation in modern history that had it easier than their parents and now has it easier than their children. So no, take that boomer slop out of here. Boomers just suck it up and keep going until we have it. Yeah, says you, the boomers that live off of entitlements now. Really? Oh, you better not touch my Social Security. Yuck, yuck. I lived during the easiest economic times ever, and still I can't afford to live without Social Security. Yuck, yuck. Yeah, get right out of here with that shit. That's not going to be tolerated here on this channel whatsoever. Don't even try that. Silver Spooners, more like, says not Jeff the Red. Yeah, exactly. And listen, I'm not even a boomer hater, okay? It's a generational thing. It's kind of like how millennials will have to eat the blame for Mamdani being elected in New York City, right? I don't even fucking live there. I couldn't have voted for Mamdani even if I wanted to. And if I did live there, I wouldn't have voted for him. But millennials as a whole are going to get blamed for Mamdani. So am I saying all boomers are gross? No, of course not. I know a lot of cool boomers. In my everyday life, I go to the gym, I wind up laughing and joking around with boomers, right? Like, it's not a person-to-person thing, but it is a generational hate thing, and I'll freely admit I fucking hate the boomers as a whole. I do. When you talk to them individually, there's great ones out there, as there are in any generation. There's great I love Gen Z as a whole for the most part. I like half of millennials. I find the younger millennials, like myself, are more based. The older ones are they're all married and, like, you know, kind of gay and whatnot, and, like, you know, they're cucked. But regardless, there's good people in every generation. There's some good Gen Xers, right? Gen X always gets overlooked. But as a whole, generations are going to be held responsible in history for what happened under their watch. And under the boomers' watch, all of our country was sold out from under us. Manufacturing went overseas. They drag raced on our economy. You know, even Reagan, who was a great president in a lot of ways, still made stupid mistakes. That was under boomers' watch. The housing market was never better than under the boomers' watch. Now it's the worst. It's an absolute shit market. Nothing is good about this economy. All of our jobs are gone. Immigration was allowed at a massive scale. Everything's destroyed. Our culture's gone. Feminism crept in. The hippie era, even though it was despised by a lot of boomers, all of this took place then. So the generation shares the blame. And that's how you don't have to like it. But then again, I've also noticed with boomers, they don't like taking accountability for this stuff. When I was 12, I hadn't even gotten started in life, and I was already getting lectured to from boomers about how my generation was the most selfish and entitled generation ever. It was almost as if the boomers knew that they fucked us over and that we were about to be entering the world as millennials and realize it. So they wanted us to think it was all our fault. I was 12 when I got told that. I was literally in 8th grade. And I remember boomers telling me, I don't know what it is about your generation, but you're the most fucking selfish, entitled generation ever. Like, shut up, boomer. Shut the fuck up. So yeah, I don't want to hear it, okay? I really don't want to hear it. Gen X and Z spend all your money on everything and cry when winter comes. Okay, man. Yeah, brain dead take. It's because you buy your Starbucks coffee and you pay for your Spotify premium that you're broke. I mean, if you could just save that $45 extra a month, You would be so much better off, dude. Shut up. Shut up. You're so out of touch. Go live off your 401k and your Social Security. Truth, says Ken Wow, 7309. Thank you. Appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe to American Advocates right now if you haven't. That's going to be it for everybody. That's going to be it at this point, guys. I appreciate everybody who tuned in. If you left a chat that I didn't read and you're really upset about it and you feel ignored like you were by your father growing up and you want me to see it and you're going to complain about how the big bad streamer didn't acknowledge your chat, then please, by all means, feel free to leave a comment after the fact when this post is a video on my channel. Be sure to like that as well. Subscribe, turn on post notifications. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. If you just got here and you were wondering what the stream was about, it was about the Epstein Files originally, and if you missed it, feel free to go back and watch it. Thank you for everybody. Thanks for all of the support. Says Paris Corner Coconut Lagoon. I appreciate that. Thank you for affirming your support. Thank you, 2009 Lifeguard, my super chatter of the day. Thank you so much as well. God bless all of you. Listen, this country can be saved. Do not give up hope. But all of us need to rise up as Americans, and we need to get serious about it. Some of us need to take political power. We need to get serious, okay? This channel exists for Americans who love America. So glory to America. God bless the USA, and God bless you.